How have you seen feedback specifically play this role in terms of fostering leaders who are willing to have the type of presence that you just shared with us?
Feedback is one of the greatest gifts you could ever get. People who care about you give good feedback. People who don't care about you, they could give half-measure feedback that they're not really thinking about.
Especially when you're earlier in your career, the right feedback can unlock next level of wealth.
Positive feedback sets up your growth feedback. You give them a steady diet of truthful, specific, positive feedback. You build the right to give the growth feedback.
What is it, Mike, that gets in the way of this ideal state about having more honesty, listening, and seeking out feedback?
I really feel that not having a culture of self-awareness. And I think it's this giant debate of, do you have a culture that leans towards vulnerability and you can feel free to make mistakes? Or do you have this sort of culture of impregnability and perfection? And I think the onus is on leaders to kickstart this by showing vulnerability first.
My very special guest is the Wall Street Journal bestselling author of The Science of Dream Teams. He's also the CEO of the Predictive Index, the leader in talent optimization, and he coached the 1996 U.S. Olympic sailing team, where he was named Coach of the Year for the sport of sailing. He is Mike Zani. Welcome to the show, Mike.
It's good to be here, Matty P.
It's been a long time coming, and I'm so excited to have you on with the audience, talking all about it. You and I go way back, and this is going to be a hell of a lot of fun.
It's time to lead the people.
It is. It absolutely is. Well, I want to get started with this. In your awesome book, The Science of Dream Teams, you wrote a passage. I want to read it out loud so I don't screw it up. Effective talent optimization involves bringing humans far more in touch with each other, communicating more with greater honesty, listening, and seeking out feedback. I love that phrase, that whole passage. What is it, Mike, that gets in the way of this ideal state about having more honesty, listening, and seeking out feedback?
I love the writing. Thank you. Thank you for reading that, Matt. You know, I really feel that not having a culture of self-awareness, and I think it's this giant debate of, do you have a culture that leans towards vulnerability and you can feel free to make mistakes, or do you have this sort of culture of impregnability and perfection? And I think the example of this, I'm gonna pick on investment bankers because they deserve to be picked on occasionally, but you can imagine, the senior investment banker giving the mentee, words of advice like never let them see you sweat or fake it till you make it or whatever the case is. And I think that's the opposite. And maybe that works for investment bankers, right? Whereas I think for most of us, where it isn't this culture of like power and impregnability, need to create this culture of self-awareness. And this is about growth and development. And it's based on trust and openness and transparency. And I think the onus is on leaders to kickstart this by showing vulnerability first, by saying, hey, Matt, I may be your boss, but I'm working on some stuff. I'm not perfect. And I actually want to recruit you to help me. And that opens the door to you going like, yeah, I can work on stuff too. If the boss is willing to show vulnerability, then I am too. And if the boss says, never let them see you sweat, then you're like, okay, never let them see you sweat.
It's so true. And it's so counterintuitive especially for new managers who have just gotten promoted, and you've seen all these, and hopefully you've been exposed to some really great leaders who look like they've always got the right answer. And you're like, I don't. And it's very concerning to be like, I'm supposed to make myself vulnerable. How does that work?
In the coaching world, there are a lot of sports where you swing things like baseballs and golf clubs, tennis rackets. They're like, make sure you're not over gripping. You can hold it too tight. And I think if you have this culture of perfection, the tendency is to grip it too tight. Whereas if you're like, I can make a mistake, you can get in a more natural state.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is something that's critically important to develop that self-awareness, as you pointed out, Mike, which is all about feedback. We have to get feedback. We have to deliver feedback. And I find that for as long as I've been in the business world, it's a long time. I mean, look at me, look a mess, old. But we never spend enough time, in my opinion, teaching leaders how to give and receive feedback properly. Now, you're now CEO. You've been in the business a long time too, but how have you seen feedback specifically play this role in terms of fostering leaders who are willing to have the type of presence that you just shared with us?
It's incredible, but feedback is one of the greatest gifts you could ever get, and I'll even say high quality feedback is truly a gift. when people who care about you give good feedback. People who don't care about you, they could give, platitudes or, half measure feedback that they're not really thinking about. But this gift is something that you should really embrace. And so my son had his first real job this summer, an internship for a venture capitalist in LA. And his boss told him some positive things and also some negative or growth things at the end of the internship. And some of these things are things that his mother and I have been talking about for years. But hearing it from a boss made it really meaningful and impactful. And it's something that we're like, we've been saying that for years. But, like when you really get it from someone, a boss who cares, that gives you good feedback, and it can lead to real growth. And growth in ways that you might not have achieved otherwise.
It's so true, and I think that perspective, and it's amazing how wise your parents become after you've gone out in the real world. You've got your stuff pushed in a little bit here and there, and it's that relationship is also something that can be triggering too. I know that sometimes if you provide feedback, depending on that relationship, like when you're a boss, your feedback carries a lot of weight, so we have to be mindful about that as well. Even a comment in passing might be taken like, oh no, that's like something I have to fix immediately. Super constructive, right?
Yeah. With great power comes great responsibility. Thank you, Superman's uncle, Spider-Man's uncle. Sorry.
It's pretty incredible. But I'll tell you, I wanted to dig into feedback. There's a lot of different types of it, and I wanted to see if we could cover off on a couple of different examples. Really give some range here for the listeners about the different types of feedback that we have. And I know that we have this mutual friend. He's great. Michael Alasso, former actor, loves sitting in on his workshops. He's got so much great experiences and really gets you deep into, what it's like to be present and really to be on stage, so to speak, but also just how you show up in your leadership. But he created this awesome term called TSP, and you're a master at this. So I wonder if you could share that technique with us.
Well, I certainly wasn't a natural master at it, but TSP is an acronym for truthful, specific, positive feedback. And most people don't give full TSP, they give TP, truthful, positive. Hey, Matt, your podcast is great. And you're like, is that a platitude? Do I really think it's great? It comes with the S, the specificity, where Michael says this specificity does a couple of things. One, it shows people that you're really paying attention. Two, it gives them things that are more actionable, things that were really tangible to them. And it also sets up some other things with specificity that each time you do it, it sort of fills their cup in a way that TP, and he does say, he goes, TP is good for one thing, and it's certainly not giving feedback. So the TSP, you really have to work on the specificity. And if you go on this journey to like look for the specificity of feedback, it really unlocks a lot of things for you. And I owe Michael, great credit for changing how I gave feedback because of his little mnemonic, if you will.
Well, I've had the benefit of seeing you in action and seeing you use that technique. And I'm always amazed. And one thing I think that it really does a great job also is it reinforces that we need to be giving feedback regularly. And I think that what you've been able to do is when you see somebody doing something and you give that TSP recognition in the moment, we're not waiting for an annual review cycle. We're not waiting until a problem has now gotten out of hand. And so that specific part it kind of marries up nicely in my experience when it comes to like, hey, this just happened, but I really like the way that you always take this. Yeah. So like as soon as it pops into your mind, I've seen you use TSP in the moment to say, we can be really kind of big idea people, but you always come and bring us back down onto the agenda or whatever, something like sounds small, but then that person walks away from that experience being like, oh, wow, Mike noticed that. And now I feel great. I'm going to go home and tell my spouse about this great day I just had. It's amazing what can happen.
It's sometimes in meetings when you might come to the answer first, or maybe in a CEO position, I got the answer first, or maybe even pre-wired before the meeting. They didn't want to surprise me. So I can have the freedom to spend my time looking for specificity and, write it down and be like, oh, Lindy said X and it was, really great and changed the dynamic. And I can next time we have a one-on-one, I can bring up some specificity, or maybe it's right after the meeting, but, giving yourself the space to look for it.
Yeah. And I think that's for people who are listening in, that's some next level stuff that Mike's sharing with us too, which is that as you progress in your leadership career, you're not even just in the meeting. You're definitely talking about the meeting, you're definitely present in the meeting, but you're also observing the dynamic. And I think that's what you're talking about, Mike, is that maybe you get a little bit of advantage because you kind of maybe know some of what's about to happen, ideally, but you're watching the people's reactions, the dynamic, how it's unfolding. You're thinking about the next level of the process. And for those of us that aspire to, try to make to that next level and advance in our careers, just knowing that, that's something that we can matriculate to and emulate.
And this works at all levels. I've actually, when I was just getting introduced to TSP, uh, my children and I were enjoying a dinner lovingly made for by their mother. And they were like, "Oh, dinner was great, Mom." And I'm like, what did you really like about it?" And I taunted them or teased out the specificity from them. So all of a sudden, my wife's got like a tear in her eye because they said all the things that she needed. It wasn't just like, "Dinner's great, Mom." It was all these little things. And their kids were like, "What was that?" I was like, "Well, that was pretty powerful stuff." So it works at literally all levels.
I can just imagine it. Conley, the amount of paprika you used was just exquisite. That's
It
very
was, I
cool.
mean, with kids, it's not that level. They're like, "Well, you always really put a lot of thought into it, Mom, and you make things we like." So it's like little goofy stuff at the time.
Yeah, that reinforces another thing I always say too, which is leadership isn't just something that happens at work. I
No,
mean, we all have the opportunity. We're out in town, you're picking up your dry cleaning or something, and you have a chance to offer TSP and make somebody's day a little bit better. It's like it makes a difference in people's lives, it makes a difference in the world, and it's not hard and it's free and it's fast. How many things are fast and free in this world? So kudos to Michael Alasso for teaching us TSP, and I appreciate you
yeah,
sharing
thank you,
that one for
Michael.
sure. But I'll give you another one. So we're covering now a range of different feedback types. So that one's one that's kind of small and in the moment. This next one's a little bit more involved and a little bit more special. I'd never heard of it until I had met you. You use this technique called FOTBOT, and I'm keeping these abstract so you give you the chance to explain it. But can you tell us what FOTBOT is and how have you found this useful in your developing of other leaders and even for yourself?
Oh, we owe Drew Fortin for shortening it to FOTBOT, but it stands for front of T-shirt, back of T-shirt, and it was something developed by Jim Allen, who is a partner at Bain and Company in their London office. And Jim Allen created this framework based on um, becoming a partner at Bain. And so what's on the front of your T-shirt are all of the things that are positives about you and that you've probably been given every job for. So, Matt, I know you well enough to understand that you have incredible energy, you're very passionate, you're driven, super hard worker, so loyal, very, very creative in your approach, gifted verbally, and I say these things and you're probably like, yeah, I like when Mike says them. And people do. They like what's on the front of their T-shirt. Well, there's a similarly long list on the back of your T-shirt that unfortunately you don't like as much. None of us do. It's that you can even be embarrassed by them. You could be frustrated by them, but they're no less true, and they're often linked to the things on the front. And the reason Jim did this was Jim was like, he says, when you're standing about ready to get promoted to partner, you have a tremendous front of T-shirt. It is never called into question. The reason you don't make partner at Bain is because of things on the back of your T-shirt, which are out of control, where they are so strong that you're not in control of them, or they manifest at the wrong times or regularly. And the reason he came up with the T-shirt analogy is they're easy to say when people are walking away from you or on the other side of the glass wall, where you go to say, "Well, Bob's a totally, a-hole," or whatever it is that runs people over and he's dismissive and things that prevent you on this way. So when I heard of this, when I heard of this framework, I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. I've got to go on this journey. And I actually hired a coach. And 2006, I hired a coach. I said, I want to find out what's on the front and back of my T-shirt. And I think it's important for the audience. You need to celebrate both. Don't just go hunting for the back. They need to be in balance. But I will give you an example. Like in 2006, I found out that I don't always listen. And when someone said that, I was like, yeah, that in fact is true. But in the years since, I've really teased out modes of not listening because it's way more complex than just that. There are times when I call it, the squirrel or bright shiny thing where you say something and I get distracted. So it's almost like not having the discipline to hang with a conversation. The second mode is when I've already made up my mind, which is, and I sort of hear, nah, 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 I can't hear you when you're talking the counterpoint. And the third, and this is the worst one, and I'm embarrassed by this one, but it is when I don't respect you in a topic. And this one, is, like, let's just say someone in marketing who's gifted at writing or creative wants to make a point on finance. And I was, like, we don't need to hear from marketing on finance, please. And the thing is, you're like, but maybe, just maybe, this is the breakthrough moment, the breakthrough idea. Why don't I have I'm paying this person? Like, why aren't I listening to them fairly? And this got so bad that I actually gave a safety word to my employees, Ticonderoga. So it like, you're not listening. So Matt, you're trying to convince me of something that's counterpoint to what I already believe. And you go, Ticonderoga, Mike. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes, sit on my hands, and really, really listen to you, or try to, as much as I can. And thereby, I've recruited your help in dealing with my back of t-shirt. They're going to your first question about creating that vulnerable self-awareness culture.
Yeah, and it's so true. And I love that there's two parts of that. So the first was, what we might refer to as self-awareness. So we're enhancing our self-awareness by going through the exercise of the front and the back of the t-shirt, but also self-regulation. And in this case, a cue that now helps us to understand, like, oh, I'm doing that thing, whatever it might be for a given person, and saying that it'll enhance my self-regulation if somebody can be a partner to me and call my attention to this is happening, which is a really powerful thing.
And it is the self-regulation, because I think people who go on this journey of finding out what's on the front and the back, then they realize they kind of take ownership of the back, as opposed to the first reaction is, oh, no, it's not there. And then they own it, and then you find out, like, when does it happen? Is it when I'm tired? Is it, when I'm frustrated for another reason, something like that, stressed out? You find the triggers, and then you're like, you feel it coming on. It almost is like getting when you get flush, you get a feeling like that and go, I'm about to not listen to Matt. Let me give him the respect of, like, okay, Matt and I are in a debate. I kind of want to run him over. I'm the boss, but instead I should listen. So you're right. It is a self-regulation, because you can't get rid of this stuff.
Right. It's deep. It's in there. And I think this is the thing, too, for listeners, is that leadership is an inner journey, right? It's a lot of deep work, and you got to confront some things that are not altogether comfortable. And I went through with a bunch of your senior leaders, too, Mike, at one time. This is going back a couple of years, but we went through the FODBOT exercise. And so we're all sitting around a table. We were offsite somewhere, and we're taking the notes about what we believe our own front of t-shirt to be, but what the back of t-shirt is for everybody else. And then we would take turns going around the room to read basically both lists. And so when it came time for my back of t-shirt, somebody had said to me, her name was Sarah, and she said, Matt, sometimes we know that you're listening to us, waiting for your chance to talk because you're smart. We get it. But guess what? We're smart too. And you're like, oh my gosh, what a disrespectful thing. You have to take ownership of that. You have to, like you said, Mike, you have to now be aware of that. You have to start to self-regulate and say to yourself, is this really what I want? And in that case, for me personally, it was like, absolutely not. That's not what I want. Where is this coming from? And to your point about why the back of t-shirt is so, it's so like persistent. There's deeply seated beliefs. In my case, being an insecure overachiever, having imposter syndrome, it was getting the best of my interaction with a trusted and beloved coworker. You can't have that. So now here's part of that deep journey. So I thought about it, so powerful.
So when I give people feedback, whether it be, formal or informal, when I get a chance to, I go, let's start putting this into the framework, front of t-shirt, back of t-shirt. You keep the document, your document. You take ownership of what's on it. I can't just tell you what's on it. You have to believe what's on it. And it's amazing that you heard from Sarah that was true. And you're like, I don't want to be that person. Most people don't want to be that person. They don't want to be their back of t-shirt person. And I think if they go there, that's the unlock, when they go, I can start owning this thing.
Yeah, exactly right. The first step is, oh my gosh, I am that person. And then deciding I don't want to be that person. And then I'll go back to what you had said with Ticonderoga, which was in having the good sense to enlist the help of saying, hey, look, I know I'm working through this, I'm practicing this. If you can be my accountability partner and say Ticonderoga or tap your head or whatever signal you can give me if I'm not as present as I'd like to be, that would really help me out. I think what a way to do what we said in the first passage, humanize this experience that we're having with one another, because we're all on our respective journeys. It's just I'm enjoying this conversation like so
Well, I
much.
mean, look, the audience has to get their own safety word. They can't use taekwondo. That's my safety word.
That was taken, so you can have some help on that one. But I'll move us to one last example of feedback, and this one's probably one that's most familiar with to just about everybody. It's the most formal, and that's 360 feedback. So for those who might be listening, 360 feedback is usually when you provide feedback about your own recent performance, as well as getting the collection, ideally from, if you're, let's say, your manager, from your boss, from your peers, and maybe from your directs, and have this kind of 360 view. So we're getting a holistic view of what relative performance and recent experiences working with you has been like. So it's popular, but sometimes it's pretty poorly implemented too. But my question for you, Mike, considering how prevalent 360s are, what makes it hard to get 360s right? And what can we do to improve our odds at making them helpful?
I mean, there are a couple of foundational basics that are super important. Getting the right reviewers, first of all, that the person who's being reviewed should sort of participate in this, but you also want to make sure it's not selection bias. That you want senior, peer, direct reports. You can't do 10. If you do 10, you'll crush the company. But you want to make sure it's also not people who are just going to give, glowing feedback, because you actually want to build things, people who are going to be more critical of that. This isn't just let's have the reviewer feel as good as possible. This is about getting real feedback. So getting the right reviewers. Two is anonymity needs to be real. Like and this really comes from how you design the assessment and the reporting, because you don't want people teasing out. The idea is if it doesn't feel like the anonymity is real, people will hold back, and they don't want to threaten their own job or security. They don't want to say things that they want to say if their name's going to be attached to it. And then I think this one is most important: getting the review to not be linked to compensation. If it's linked to compensation and money's involved, people are universally funny about money. So the person will over glorify the things they've done, and the reviewers may hold back because they're like, I don't want to impact this person's financial livelihood. So what it should be done is we put them on opposite sides of the calendar. That we want you to get reviewed on a different time from when your compensation is being adjusted or annualized or reset. Um, and really, we say the focus of the 360 is about personal development. It's about you being the best version of yourself you can be, and setting yourself up for your long-term goals. Not just I need a 5.5% pay raise this annual sequence.
Yeah, it makes good sense. And I think it's amazing, especially when you're earlier in your career, the right feedback can unlock a next level of wealth, to be honest. Your promotion path, like you said earlier, the example from Jim from Bain, can be unblocked. Like, what's that worth? So a lot of times we fixate on short-term compensation conversations, but really invest in the feedback, because if you get the right feedback, as you pointed out, Mike, and you're getting that good bag of t-shirt, whether it comes through a 360 or a specific exercise, those are the things that are holding you back. So own them and work on them. And, you won't have to worry nearly as much about those short-term compensation conversations, because you'll be given more responsibility, and all that stuff kind of takes care of itself a little bit. It's pretty incredible when you think about this. And we've been talking about feedback in both contexts. We've talked about positive feedback we get, as well as some of the challenging feedback and constructive, and you refer to as growth feedback. But I've also heard you say that we have to get the ratio right. What is it what do you mean when you say we have to get the ratio right when it comes to positive and negative?
Yeah, the ratio, it's important to keep it in perspective in all things. Like oftentimes when I do front of t-shirt, back of t-shirt, people just want to dive to the back. And you're like, let's also celebrate the front. You got to keep these things in perspective. But I think your positive feedback sets up your growth feedback. Because if you give people enough, and we'll get back to Mike Lalasso's TSP, if you give them a steady diet of truthful, specific, positive feedback, specificity is important, and that you build the right to give the growth feedback without losing the thing of I've got your back. And if you lose the I've got your back, the ratio has gone too far to growth feedback or negative feedback. And some people have a hard time of giving uh, specificity with positive. They just give the specificity with the growth or negative feedback. Um, and I think you need to give the right ratios. And loosely speaking, it'd be like 2 to 1, 2 growth to 1 feedback. And don't do the compliment sandwich. It's not growth, or sorry, positive, negative, positive. That's going to confuse people. Do enough positive feedback so that you can give them a straight shot. You're like, I'm giving you some growth feedback. Is now a good time? And don't pull any punches. Be respectful. Give, again, specificity. And ask them after you do. You go, do you still feel like I have your back? And like, oh yeah. You might even love me, because the growth feedback is also a gift, to give it in the right way so that people can understand it, hear it, embrace it, maybe even ask for some follow-up. And I think when some people are like, I can never find positive feedback on someone. All I see is the negative or growth feedback. And you're like, maybe this person shouldn't be reporting to you. Maybe this person is in the wrong role. Maybe they should be succeeding at another company. But if you really can't see any positive to give them, so your ratio is screwed up in that way, you've got a bigger problem. You probably have the person in the wrong job, wrong role, wrong fit.
Right. And if you say, none of my people, I can find any positives, well, maybe you're not in the right position either.
Yeah.
That does happen. Maybe your view on this is a little bit tilted, but I think it's also very powerful when you think about something that comes up a lot in my conversations with executive teams and managers, which is our people aren't willing to have the tough conversations. They're avoiding the difficult conversations. And the difficult conversations, I'm building on a point you made, which is they're a lot less difficult when we've been giving that regular dosage of the TSP that you mentioned. So every time I hear where our people won't hold their directs accountable, they won't address the performance issues, I'm like, let's go back and let's start figuring out where are we highlighting successes, because if we're not having any successes, that's a different problem. That's usually not the case. It's that we're not able to get to the next level without the difficult conversations. Well, how much are we showcasing the good stuff, all that's going well, the things that people are doing? So I think your counsel to really get the ratio right when it comes to, a steady dose of TSP. And again, the T is important too. You got to be truthful. But at the same time, then it's a lot less biting when somebody comes and says, you really, on that last meeting, it was almost like you mailed it in. Did you do any prep at all? If that's the only time they're getting feedback from you, they're like, oh no, I'm going to lose my job, versus saying like, you know what, the last 10 things were all positive or whatever it is. But this one, you know what, it did. I could have done better prep, and I'll fix that next time.
And someone might link and they go, yes, there was something different this meeting. I felt it too.
100%. But and I'll one of my last questions for you here is recognizing that not all organizations have a feedback culture. So maybe they're not providing as much feedback as they'd like. How do you think about these respective responsibilities when it comes to executives, HR counterparts, as well as leaders at every level to create that type of a feedback culture?
I think if you start this from the leadership level, if you've got that opportunity, but go to your head of people, whoever that title might be, and it changes from organization to organization, that you really need to build this into every human touch system you have, that it's okay to give feedback positively, and it is okay to give growth feedback. And here are the sort of these are sort of the tribal things that we do as an organization where we solicit this, so people really feel that there's a culture of that. Like we've even, one of our cultural elements is courage. To have the courage to give people the tough conversation, and have the courage to listen. And it gets into, I mean, courage is bigger than just the examples I used, but it gets into if you really want that blissful feedback, culture of self-awareness, it's everybody needs to be involved. And it's going to come from leadership. They're the chief cultural officer. But it's going to be implemented and systematized and scaled if you get your people operations team very involved with the same mission.
Love that. So I love how much participation there is. Everybody has to get involved. I love the examples you've given us today of different types of feedback. It's not like we're only going to do one thing. We've got lots of different opportunities to do it. So it's a real mesh work we're creating to create that feedback culture. Mike, one thing I like to do with my guests at the end of the show is to play a fun trivia game. You and I are going to be a team. We're going to have AI ask a trivia question. And I mentioned at the top that you have a sailing background.
Okay.
So we're going to get a trivia question to us about sailing. And the reason I wanted to bring you on the team on this one is because you got to be a ringer. The last couple shows, I think we've been terrible at the trivia. So we'll try this one. Here it comes. Which of the following terms refers to the left side of the boat when facing forward? Is it A, starboard, B, port, or C, bow?
That was a layup. It's port.
It's B, port is what we're going with. Audience, if you're playing along at home, you can log in and lock in your answer. We're going with port. And that is right. The answer is port. Fabulous. The opposite side, of course, is starboard. But my question for you, Mike, too, is so when you're in Olympic sailing, do Olympic sailors ever capsize their boats, or are they just so good at it that doesn't really ever factor into it?
No, they do capsize. They do
Really?
capsize in
That's
very
encouraging.
windy conditions when you're pushing it super hard, you're on the edge. It's kind of like even the best, Formula One drivers occasionally slide off the track.
Do they ever laugh at each other like, oh man, you wiped out on that
They're
one?
usually not laughing. Nope, definitely not.
It's got to be humbling. You're like, I'm literally going for the Olympics, and here I am very wet, and I don't want to be.
Yep.
Well, Mike, I got an even better question for you, which is where can my audience go to learn more about you, about the book, about Predictive Index?
Absolutely. There's two great locations. For the book, dreamteams.io is the book's own URL. You can read a sample chapter there. You can even take a behavioral assessment if that's something that you really wish to do. But more importantly, I think if you want to find out about a platform which helps you with talent, you can find out more about the Predictive Index at predictiveindex.com. Would love you to demo some systems. There is a PI Perform is a system which really helps you with, running great one-on-one meetings, giving feedback, understanding people's behavioral styles. So you can give feedback in the way they want to receive it, and gives you great templates for giving feedback like ThoughtBot and 360 Review. So would love you to find out more about that, and follow me on LinkedIn. I try and pump out a lot of great content about these topics.
I love it. And listeners, we're going to have all those links for you in the show notes. So you're only one click away from getting connected with Mike and following up on all these great tips he's had for us about how to get better at giving feedback. So Mike, thanks so much for being with us today. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Matt. It's great. Lead the people.
Woo! Is that the Amy Cuddy? Got to get wide. Get wide.
Huge. Well, at least as huge as I got.
I love it. You got to go with what you got.